Hi, I'm Nick Palmisciano, and this is the Bad News Network. Well, let's get right to it. Abortion. What people need to understand is...
Hell no. You're not doing this.
Look, I know it's an uncomfortable topic, but if we talk through the finer points...
No matter what you say, everyone will hate you.
But what if...
I know you. You've listened to everybody.
But what if...
I saw you reading that Carl Sagan article the other day. I know you're going to try and build a bridge for discussion, but at the end of the day, you're going to be the only one on the bridge, and that bridge is going to be on fire.
Okay. Can I at least say that no matter what your stance is on abortion, almost everyone would prefer a world where they're just not necessary. And as such, I think we really need to take a hard look at policies that other countries have put into place that have reduced abortion and also made a healthier society. First of all, people need access to and education about birth control. There's a direct correlation between wealth and unwanted pregnancy. Poor kids have a tendency to not buy birth control, or worse, believe myths about pregnancy that end up putting them at risk. Second, we need to be able to provide access to cheap or free adoptions. We have tons of adults that want to adopt children, but right now the process is so costly and onerous that very few people can actually pull it off. Third, we need to provide access to cheap or free pre- and postnatal care. Again, there is a significant correlation between how much money you have and whether or not your baby is going to live or be healthy.
Okay, let's close this out.
I'm simply saying this. I would love for there never to have to be another abortion again. But no matter what you legislate, they are going to happen forever. If they were completely outlawed here, if they were a felony, they would still occur. Americans don't do well with prohibition. Rich people will travel abroad, and poor people will go to back alley doctors. But if the goal is actually to minimize abortion by preventing unwanted pregnancies in the first place, or to convince women that do have unwanted pregnancies to deliver to term, you have to make it easy. You have to come up with a solution that solves this problem at every level. Otherwise, you're just being a dick.
We are definitely going to catch crap for this.
God hates a coward, Matt.
Did you just... You did not. More than 800 measles cases have been reported, which is racing towards the 963 number of 1994, which is the highest reported case number in history. 23 states so far this year have been affected by measles. Unsurprisingly, of the 75 new cases reported this week, 63 are from New York. Much of the outbreak began when an unvaccinated child from New York visited Israel and returned with the disease. Then an infected person visited Detroit, and it spread there, leading into an outbreak in Michigan. The CDC recommends 2 doses of MMR, which is 97% effective after the second dose. Alternatively, bathe yourself in essential oils and probably die.
China, in a tit-for-tat measure against the United States, raised tariffs on a number of products, including frozen vegetables and LNG. This goes directly against President Trump's warning to China not to do that. China's finance ministry replied that their new tariffs are a direct response to President Trump's unilateralism and protectionism. China's finance ministry responded, China's adjustment on tariffs is a direct response to President Trump's unilateralism and protectionism. The president responded, I don't even use protection. President Trump plans to provide the affected farmers with subsidies. That move has kicked off a series of attacks by Democrats mocking these farm subsidies as socialism in a direct response to the many attacks Republicans have levied against them. The counter-argument to this, which rarely gets brought up but is definitely worth discussing, is that in that true free market environment, a whole lot of our farmland is going to be outsourced abroad where labor is much cheaper. That would leave America in a precarious position. If, for example, we ended up in an international war and we had no means of providing ourselves with our own food, we would be in a significant national security crisis. Hence, this is one of the reasons why Republicans, who are typically big on national security, always favor farm subsidies. There's also a story floating around that Stonewood Farms, which is a large pork-producing American farm that is owned by China, would be receiving these same subsidies. Hence, we'd be subsidizing a Chinese company that is essentially providing these tariffs in the first place. This is one of those internet memes that everyone's passing around, but there's actually no truth to it, as Stoneward Farms is exempted from these policies. More on the story of Siraj Wahaj unfolds this week. Wahaj and his two sisters were accused of setting up a terrorist training camp in New Mexico in August of 2018. This week, the FBI searched another one of his properties in Alabama that was set up in a manner that they described as a military-style obstacle course. The FBI also found the remains of a child hidden at the compound that was originally a junkyard. Police believe that the children found in shackles there were all Wahaj's children, nieces, or nephews. The saddest part about this whole story is that even in makeshift, crappy terrorist training centers, leaders still think that those stupid military obstacle courses are important. Quick, there's a war coming! There's only one way to train for this. Let's set up a series of logs that are kind of in a triangular pattern, and we're gonna weave over and under them. It's gonna be real hard at the top, but we just keep working our way through. Master that, and you'll master war.
Apparently the next mother of dragons won't be a Targaryen, but will actually be an 11-year-old girl from New Zealand. A little girl named Victoria sent $5 to Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern in the hopes that she would look into dragon research with a little bit of telekinesis on the side. I usually don't promote bribing a government official, but this I can get behind. If Jon Snow can fly a dragon, I should also be afforded that opportunity. I would do way coolish stuff than Jon Snow. Anyways, the Prime Minister returned the $5 to Victoria. She thanked her for her interest in psychics and dragons, but told her that at the time, they're not pursuing any research into those areas. Whatever, lady. We know when we're being pandered to. You're gonna be the first to go when we get our dragons. I'm gonna burn it to the ground. All of it.
President Trump is set to outline a new immigration plan that will only allow people into the country that have increased skill sets, essentially ensuring that nobody from my family or any of the families of anyone that I know would have made it into the country in the first place. Zang.
A new federal report says that birth rates in the U.S. are the lowest they've been in 32 years. Nearly all racial and age groups felt this decline, with only a slight uptick for women in their 30s and 40s. A demographer from the University of Southern California named Dowell Myers said that the low birth rates is a barometer for despair. He surmises that people just aren't happy with the state of current affairs and says that weighs on them heavily. A large group of parents also surveyed for the study weighed in, and they say that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Birth rates are down because it costs a fortune to own and operate a kid these days. And trying to balance a family and career is like juggling water. And the water is on fire. And that fire burns. The deep kind of burn. Not surface, not like on your skin, but in your soul. It hurts you. You can't see it right away. It's in the eyes. It's in the lines of the faces of the parents that are dragging their kids through Walmart while they're screaming they want another toy. Meanwhile, the soul is just leaving their body like smoke from the smoldering ruins of their once great dreams.
Fraulein Jacinda Ardern has started a great new campaign aimed at limiting the rights of New Zealanders. Since her publicized push to confiscate every single gun in New Zealand, she's kicked off a new campaign, and that's to censor social media. Her initiative, named Christchurch Call, asks governments and social media outlets to censor anyone that talks about terrorist activities. In one example, she describes that if a person posts something about terrorism without appropriate context, then they should be banned from social media for an undetermined time. Several nations have apparently agreed to sign on to this initiative. Luckily, the United States is not one of them, citing issues with the First Amendment. Let's say this vague and pretty tyrannical initiative does pass, though. What about if we deem a power-hungry elected official hell-bent on taking away our freedoms a domestic terrorist? Let me tell you what happens then. You played yourself! Dangerous freedom is always better. We cannot be so afraid that something bad might happen that we give away our freedoms to our future dictators. You shouldn't be afraid of any speech because you can always counter it with better speech and reason. You should absolutely be afraid of a weapon in the hands of the wrong person, but you should not be more afraid of that than if all of our weapons are taken away and this inalienable right is removed.
Trump is expected to sign an executive order this week that would bar U.S. companies and providers from using Chinese telecommunications. It's believed that major Chinese firms like Huawei are using their 5G services and communications equipment to spy and extract data from the US. Washington has also issued warnings to its allies to stop using Huawei's services. China adamantly denies these accusations, calling the US unfair and dishonorable. It is unclear so far as to who's telling the truth, but if there's one thing that we've learned from movie villains over the years, it's that no matter what good intentions something was built with, someone somewhere is going to try and turn that into a weapon and kill stuff with it. Or try to have sex with it. In other news, China's lying. It's China.
World War II veteran Bob Maxwell died this week at the age of 98. Bob was the nation's oldest Medal of Honor recipient. If you don't know his story, Bob Maxwell was drafted as a conscientious objector in World War II. He asked to be put in a job where he wouldn't have to kill people, but he still wanted to serve. As such, he was tasked with running telephone wires. While doing this under attack in Italy, he was shot in the leg, then mended up and returned to duty. Later, he dove on a grenade with nothing more than a set of blankets to save the men around him. Luckily, those blankets somehow took the brunt of that explosion, and Bob and everyone around him survived. First, they don't make blankets like they used to. Second, Bob was the epitome of a badass, and not in the beard-having, tatted up, muscular, one-liner spitting, tough guy cliche kind of way. Bob Maxwell was by all accounts a regular guy whose fearless spirit brought out a testicular fortitude that would make mice out of mountains. To Bob Maxwell, we say farewell and thank you for setting such an incredibly high standard. Fair winds, sir. Mayor Bill de Blasio announced his candidacy for president this week, but no one cares. Said one New York resident, "He's the Roy Rogers Burger of politicians. I don't hate him, but I can't get excited about him either. He's just so blase-eo." Iran, so far away. But not far away enough to keep the war hawks from banging the old drum. On the one hand, the United States has known for a decade that Iran has been involved in supplying our enemies and even fighting in militias against the United States, especially in Iraq. On the other hand, this would be a much larger scale war than the one that just took place in Iraq, with even less of a chance of success. Members of the military and veterans are quick to point out that the war on terror can now legally vote, and in 3 more years, we'll be able to drink. And maybe, just maybe, before we jump into a larger war on very thin intelligence, we should consider, just maybe, some diplomatic solutions. John Bolton, on the other hand, has a Woody and just wants to haul off and go Spartan on some Persians. For the time being, the president seems to be favoring the former opinion. He has stated that he does not want war with Iran and that he would prefer to begin peace talks. That being said, the United States has deployed warships and forces to the Gulf and has begun to remove diplomatic personnel from Iraq.
The Bruins are in the Stanley Cup Finals. The past series with the Bruins and the Hurricanes ended in a Bruins sweep. 4-0, baby, over the Carolina Hurricanes. Among awesome players like Chara and Marchand, the brick wall known as Tuukka Rask let damn near nothing past him. That man is unstoppable. Seriously, if you shot a water gun at him, there would be no back spray. He would just absorb it and then send it back to you. Now it's on to the Stanley Cup Finals, where we'll possibly face San Jose or St. Louis, who are currently battling it out in head-to-head games over the series right now. This bodes well for the Bruins, who made short work of the Hurricanes, and that allows them to sit back, relax, recoup, and prepare for the oncoming team in the Stanley Cup Finals. It's worth mentioning that the Red Sox won the 2018 World Series, the New England Patriots won the last Super Bowl, and now the Boston Bruins are headed to the Stanley Cup Finals to possibly bring home the cup. Give me that cup, baby!
And finally, Florida man news coming in hot this week. Christian Dudley, a native of Naples, Florida, was arrested this week for impersonating an FBI agent. Was he impersonating an agent to break into a secured facility? Or perhaps to obtain some classified documents? Or maybe even just to pull off a big heist? No sir, or ma'am. What he actually did is far weirder than any of those. Mr. Dudley was riding his bicycle with red and blue lights flashing when he decided to just run that bike and maybe bunny hop onto a random resident's lawn and try to make a citizen's arrest. He harassed the victim and demanded proof of residency. We believe his kickstand was down at the time. After the victim said no and said that she needed proof that he was an actual FBI agent, Mr. Dudley walked back over to his bicycle, reached inside a bag, and removed a series of live catfish that he then threw on the driveway before retreating on his bike and pedaling off into the distance. He was caught later by police when they recognized him, so it sounds like he didn't want to get rid of that FBI hat he got at a thrift store or the flashing red and blue lights on his bicycle that may have been a bit of a giveaway. Dudley was arrested for impersonating an FBI agent and for having an open container. There is no news about charges related to the catfish at this time. You keep it classy, Florida man. And with that, I'm Nick Palmisano, and this is the Bad News Network. Our news is at least as bad as the news you're getting already, and go Bees!